Azri and all of my friends. In this occasion, I would like to deliver my topic. It is about the learner characteristics. When we are going to teach, there are a lot of things that a teacher should prepare. What are them? They have to prepare the materials, the techniques, the activities, and also the evaluation. And the most important thing is the learner. Who are our learners? It will determine a lot of things, as a lot of researchers have mentioned that the learner's characteristic is the most important things that we need to take account into when we want to start teaching. So let's find out more about the learner characteristics.
Learner Characteristics by Ismiati, Purwaningsih, Subiana. My presentation today is divided into three sections. The first one is the learner variables, the second is the critical analysis, and the third is the implication toward the teaching process and the learning situation. Now, let's start with the questions. Who to teach? Are we going to teach young learners? The troubled teens? Adults? Are they excellent, intermediate, or need extra assistance from the teachers? Of course, we will prepare different set of teaching materials, activities, or evaluation for those specific learners. Well, Drachler and Kirshner in 2012 stated that learner characteristics are important for instructional designers as they allow them to design and create tailored instructions for a target group. It means recognizing this characteristic will help teachers to define teaching activities fit with the individual needs. Now, let's find out more about the learner variables. There are a lot of learner variables from various resources, but here I will present four major learner variables proposed by Brown and Harber in 2001. So the first, dealing with the age, it deals with the group of learner. Second is the learner differences, which is mostly talks about the potential that the learners possess. Third, deals with the proficiency levels, which deals with the assistance of the prior knowledge of the learners. And the last is the motivation, or we can say that it is the stimulation that can determine how learners learn. Okay, according to Brown, he divides the group of learners into three: the children, teens, and adults. And I have summarized the characteristics of each group in terms of 5 items. They are intellectual development, attention span, sensory input, affective factors, and authenticity and meaningfulness. Okay, now for the first item, the intellectual development. Here, for the children, according to Jean Piaget in 1972, the children is in the stage of concrete operation. So, in learning a language, they need to be given the language that they can use directly in the daily in their daily life. For example, like, what's your name? I love reading. I love playing football, let's say. And how about the teens? And the teens, in terms of the intellectual development, they come up with the abstract operation of thoughts. It means that their critical thinking has developed, but still need a lot of assistance from the teachers. And how about the adults? They are able to handle rules and concepts. So for this stage, the adults they can comprehend specific rules, and we can give them like the theories and things. And according to the attention span, the children attention span is limited. So we already know for whoever have teach the children, they only have like 10 to 15 minutes to listen to the teachers, and right after that they will busy talking with the friends or disturbing other friends. We need to prepare, and we need to select the materials and also the activities that can engage the children longer in their attention span. So how about the teens? Of course, the attention span is longer than the children. They can they can focus for a couple of times, and again, if the materials or the activities is not interesting, so they will just like neglect them and busy chatting with their friends. How about the adult? They have the longer attention span for materials. Even the material is boring, they still can stand with that one, even with the grumble inside. Or next, the third items is the sensory input. For children, they need to be stimulated all five senses. So in this case, the teaching activities deals with the teaching activities deal with the physical, mostly on the physical activities like TPR or total physical response, where the children like to running here and there, and they like to do a lot of things related to the physical interactions. And how about the teens? The varieties of sensory input are still needed here. So the teens still need the activities that deals with the physical things, but not as many as the children. And the adults less required multiple senses, but still they need the terms of the terms of the multiple senses. And how are the effective factors? While the children is extremely sensitive, especially to the to peers, uh, so for the teacher who teach the children, please try to make them comfortable. For example, if a child make a mistake, then make sure that it's okay. It's not a sin and it's not an embarrassing moment. It's still okay. And how about the teens? In this case, this is the most crucial items for the teens, because they are ultra sensitive to how others perceive them, because they are in the stage of um, they are in the age of transition, confusing and changing bodies and minds. So these things is really crucial for them. And how about the adults? They have the general self confidence. So, but it doesn't mean that they're not sensitive. Some of the adults are sensitive, but they can handle but they can handle it because they are mature enough. And the last one, in terms of the authenticity and meaningfulness. So in children, the teachers should focus on immediate use of language. So giving them the beneficial chunks or meaningful chunks that can directly practice in the classroom is supposed to do. And how about the teens? Do not use tutored language or over analysis. Even though their critical thinking has developed, but still, like I have said in the intellectual development, they still need to rehearse, and they still need the help or the assistance from the teacher. And how about the adult? They have better able to understand limited segment of language. So the activities perhaps they can like given the materials they can that can stimulate their higher critical thinking order. The second variable is learner differences. Here I highlighted two items of this variable. The first one is the aptitude, and the second is the learner styles. The aptitude is a stable cognitive characteristics of individuals who have a talent for learning other language, or in other words, it deals with the speed in a language, and it is usually seen on that level of intelligence. Well, actually, the learner styles have already explained by my friend, so here I will only re-highlight the items. The notion of these terms lies on the fact that individuals learn in different ways. Learners differ from one another in the ways in which they process information from the environment. According to Carroll and Sapon, Rubin, Homer, Ranta, and Griffith, there are some issues in aptitude variables. The first one is the aptitude test. The aptitude test predicts success yet provide insufficient information. The MLAT or Modern Language Aptitude Test is developed because of its association with audiolingual method. So it means that it only covers on specific method. The last one is the test result. The score affect different ways between the low and higher achiever. For example, the achiever who has the low score, so they will directly demotivated, and it will make the failure of the teaching and learning process. The third variable is the proficiency levels. Talking about the proficiency levels, Brown divided them into the beginning levels, the intermediate levels, and the advanced levels. Well, some of us might agree that teaching language for beginner level can be the most challenging. It is because the beginner learners almost have little or no prior knowledge of the target language. While the intermediate levels, the students in the intermediate levels or in the middle levels, they might have the ability to communicate in simple way, and we can start to blend their conversation. And so then students that reach the advanced level, if they are able to use the language in the situation where they need to they need to use it. So it means that they have already developed fluency along with a greater degree of accuracy. Now, teaching beginner levels. So of course, when we teach the beginning level, repetition of a limited numbers of words, phrases, and sentences is a must because they only have a limited knowledge about the target language. So because beginners will almost always depend on the teachers, so it is appropriate to use the teacher centered classroom. So the teacher should keep the conversation alive and should give the directions clearly for the sake of teaching flow. And because teachers input is also crucial, so the students will focus on them. So it is necessary to pay attention to our own English language fluency and make sure that our students are understand on the materials that we teach on the day. So the fluency is the goal within limited utterances length. So we need to make sure that our students can, let's say, pronounce the word correctly because the target is the fluency, but still in a limited utterances length. And the last one, for the technique, we should use short and simple techniques because, for example, and drilling as well as clearly defined and structured group work are a good example. And how about teaching the intermediate? The intermediate level learners now have the access to the next level of the learning process. So the students are supposed to have some phrases, sentences, structures, and conventional rules that have been practiced and increased. So different with the beginner level, the learner-centered and the teacher talk is not the major portion in the class, but still, teachers should guide them and to correct the mistakes that perhaps the intermediate students make. And the fluency exercise are a must because we need to make sure that our students are fluent in acquiring the target language. And how about the techniques? The techniques can increase in complexity. For example, they can have the chain stories, the surveys and polls, the paired interview, role plays, and many more. And the last one, how about teaching the advanced levels? Well, for advanced learners, teachers' role now move into assisting rather than initiating. So they are no longer initiate on every single activities. But here, because It is because the students now have gained the confidence to put the formal structures of language. And because the role of the teachers is no longer initiating, it doesn't mean that we can let the students alone. But still, the directive role of teacher in natural language and natural speed is a must. So we still need to guide and assist for any specific mistakes that the advanced students do. So they are no longer thinking about every word or structure produced because they're already confident and they already comprehend enough in the first skills, for example. And we can also in the teaching method, so we can focus on the social linguistic and pragmatic competencies. So the teaching or the activities will be um, like scanning and skimming reading materials, complex role plays, group debates, and the argumentation. The last learner variable is motivation. Well, Harmer defined motivation as the internal drive which pushes someone to do things in order to achieve something. And he also made distinction between two types of motivation, into extrinsic and intrinsic. In a nutshell, the extrinsic motivation is any number of outside factors. So the example of this extrinsic motivation is the need to pass an exam or the hope of financial reward or higher salary. How about the intrinsic motivation? It comes from within the individual. So it's so basically the intrinsic comes from the individual learner itself. So what is the example? For example, the example of this intrinsic motivation is the enjoyment of the learning process itself. And according to Brown, there are four sources of motivation. The first one is the society we live in. Is English used in everyday conversation or it is only learned in a timetable classroom? So this could be the first sources of motivation. Next is the significant others. It means that whenever someone learn a language, it means that they have affect by. According to Brown, there are four sources of motivation. The first one is the society we live in. Is English used in everyday conversation or it is only learned in a timetable classroom? This perhaps could be the first sources of motivation. Second is the significant others, or in other words, this is the people who are close to them. Parents and older siblings are typically crucial in determining students' motivation in learning. Next is the teacher. Of course, the teachers could be the greatest sources of motivation. If the teacher can motivate, if the teachers are really attractive, having a great and having a numerous great activities, then the students will not get bored. And the last one is the method. Combining the method, using the up-to-date method, and engaging students in the classroom are good sources of motivation. Let's move on the second section. It is the critical analysis and it answers the question of what do researchers think. So I have highlighted on the selected journals. The first one is the research from the Charuta in 2017. It deals with the individual learner differences and language learning strategies. So the aim of this study is to examine the relationship between the individual learner characteristics to the language learning strategies. Second, the study from the Hindle, Bright, and Whitehead in 2013. It examined the gender and learner characteristics. There are differences in acquiring the language and the learning process between the boys and the girls, and it is quite interesting because the boys and the girls have a very different have a very different types of learning process. And the third is the herd in 2006. It deals with the individual learner differences and distance language learning because um, there are two modes of language learnings: the distance language learning and the face-to-face or the traditional language learning. So the herd in 2006 tried to examine the impact on the individual learner differences. And the very recent journal is is the paper from Wong in 2020, and it has interesting title. The title is "When No One Can Go to School, Does Online Learning Meet Students' Basic Learning Needs?" So in this case, because of the pandemic COVID-19 outbreak, so the traditional face-to-face teaching mode changed into the online mode. So of course, it has a lot of impact, and in this case, Wong wanted to analyze the basic learning needs of the students that match with the online learning. The last section is the implication. After teachers know about the learner's characteristics and its variable, then the next question is what to do. Talking about the learner characteristics somehow reminds me with the inspirational movie entitled The Round Clock Story. So the movie is based on a true story where a teacher named Ron Clark leaves his small hometown and head to one of the most challenging public school in the country. Recognizing his students' characteristic and his students' need has led him to be the most successful teacher to change students' behavior, because in the movie he has given the troublemaker class by the principals, and he tried hard to make the students under his treatment transform into the successful person in the future. So here I have highlighted the interesting quote from the movie. I teach you and you teach me. Together we learn to love to learn. So it is impossible for a teacher to have this kind of things if they do not know who are the learners and what are the characteristics of the learners. So taken from the Charunta in 2017, it is important to recognize different characteristics of language learners, since all these are useful for a language teacher to organize learning activities. I highlighted these to organize learning activities. So, what are the implications for the teaching and learning situation? For teaching across age levels, we need teachers need to pay attention to specific target learners in order to engage them in a class. And meaningful classroom activities. Teachers may select the appropriate teaching activities that covers various learners' differences. And the last but most important thing is changing learners' behavior. We all know that the purpose of teaching and learning process is changing the learner's behavior. So the learners will gain values input that change their attitude toward the language, from zero to hero, from nothing to be something.
Well, considering the learner variables will eventually help us in creating effective, efficient, and meaningful teaching process. Thank you very much for watching my video presentations. If you have any question, just post it on a Google Classroom. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.